Hello folks, Reginald Scott here. Welcome to the video. Great to see you all again, and I hope you're all doing really well today. If you could do me a massive favor, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with a friend, all that good stuff. Thank you very much. You join me for another night ride tonight. It is of course a fasting month here in Brunei, and as a result of that, we can't ride in the daytime because it's too hot and we're not allowed to drink or eat. So it's only night riding from here on in for a while. And I thought I would talk to you today about a very interesting subject. Let's move over. I've got loads of room here. Very interesting subject somebody asked me about, which was, what's my opinion on T47? Okay, what is T47? T47 is a bottom bracket type. It's they're probably one of the newest iterations of a bottom bracket type. And when I mean bottom bracket, I'm actually talking about the shell of the bike, right? The shell where you put your bottom bracket system. Because the system, I suppose, could be a cup or a bearing. But the actual shell is the hole that you have to put that cup or bearing into. And T47 is, like I say, one of the latest ones. And somebody wanted to, like I say, ask me my opinion about T47. Is it worth it? What do I think? Is it good? So on and so forth.
Hey, is it worth it?
And while I was considering this subject, I asked myself, would I not buy a bike based on the bottom bracket alone? Like if I found a really good bike that I liked, you know, I loved the frame and all that, would I be so put off by the bottom bracket system that even if the rest of the bike was perfect, I would actually not buy the bike? And I thought it was an interesting question, and it's something I think you guys need to think about. How important is the bottom bracket? How important is it to you? Well, this is lovely. There's one thing you can always look forward to in a night ride, and that's getting rained on. So, like I said, I'm going to try and answer that question. So, firstly, what is T47? If you imagine the BSA standard bottom bracket, which is the two threaded cups into a threaded frame, T47 is basically that. It's just two threaded cups threaded into a frame, and it's basically turning PF30, so bottom bracket system PF press fit 30, into a threaded design. Because right now, you know, threaded bottom brackets are all the rage because everyone's got a negative impression about press fit, and so the industry are looking either for a solution or they're looking for a way to convince you that they have a solution. And as I've stated in previous videos, there is really nothing wrong with press fit bottom brackets. The issue is the frame material. And the frame material in question, the main culprit, is carbon fiber. Carbon fiber just doesn't make good bike frames. And one of the reasons it doesn't make a good bike frame is because it's molded, and molded things aren't very good for pushing in precision equipment. So that is the problem that the industry have found themselves in. All these creaky bottom brackets that we have, the vast majority of them, not all, but the vast majority, are as a result of slightly misaligned or misshapen carbon fiber bottom brackets. And as I say, this has made the industry look a bit bad, and so they are looking for a solution. And the solution they've come up with, they're convinced is the right solution, is to turn a press fit standard PF30 into a threaded standard, and they call it T47. So to give you a great example, my Lightspeed bike, I'm not riding the Lightspeed today, I'm riding the Cinelli Nemo steel frame with its BSA threaded bottom bracket, but my Lightspeed has a PF30 bottom bracket, which is basically as simple as you can get. It's a round tube, okay, very round tube by the way, precision round tube. And in that round tube is pressed a pair of cups. You know, sometimes it's a a sleeve that is threaded on both ends. You know, if you go for a fancy bottom bracket, like a Paraxis or, you know, one of the fancier BBB ones, or is it BB Infinite do one? Anyway, I digress. But yeah, usually it's just two smooth cups. So you press those two smooth cups in, and those two smooth cups have got your bearings installed into them. And as long as that hole is round on both sides, and as long as those two sides line up in the middle, yeah, you know, they're not misaligned or misshapen, to put it that way, then your bottom bracket is going to be fine. It's going to work really well. Now, me personally, I always use a little bit of grease. I know some bike shops say you shouldn't use grease when you're pressing in bottom brackets, and I totally disagree with that, and I've never had issues with greasing up bottom brackets. I always put grease no matter what, basically. And even on a tie frame, which is super robust and not really going to be an issue in any situation, even on a tie frame, I put grease. Even if I'm pressing in a plastic cup into a tie frame, I put a little bit of aquaproof or something in there just to help things slide in. You know, you've got to lube it up before you push it in, and it eliminates any possibility for creaking, because what creaking is most of the time is the cups moving, right? And the main reason why your cups are going to start moving is because either something is loose, like your actual crank system is loose, and so it's allowing things to move, or either there's a misshapen shell or a misaligned shell, and every time you turn the cranks, the cups are trying to compensate for the misalignment, and so they're moving, and that's what causes the creaking. Now, again, with my bottom bracket shell, because it's in titanium, because it was machined, precision machined, it doesn't need to worry about that, because there's no chance of those cups ever moving. But like I say, a lot of people with carbon frames, they do have that issue, because the vast majority, I'd say, of like giant frames or Scott frames or even Trek frames that come through my shop are misshapen ever so slightly. They always have some misshapen BB to them. It's in varying degrees, and most of the time it's not enough to cause a problem. And one of the reasons why a lot of press fit systems use a plastic cup is to compensate for that. Okay, so by using a plastic cup, you're making it less likely that the system's going to creak. And so, like I say, the manufacturers thought about that. They were like, well, we know that molding these carbon frames is a bad idea, but if we use a plastic cup, it might kind of shape itself to the misshapen hole and, you know, eliminate that issue. And to some extent it does, okay, having a softer cup. If you press in like an aluminium cup, like a machined aluminium cup or something, then you're going to definitely get a problem, because that's not going to conform to the hole. It's going to force the hole to conform to it. Anyway, back to the light speed. I have built something like 14 or 15 light speeds now, I think, all with PF30 bottom brackets, all with press fit 30 bottom brackets, all basically round tubes with cups pressed into them. I've pressed in aluminium cups, I've pressed in plastic cups, and I've pressed in the threaded type BBs, you know, the two sides that screw together as they go into the frame. And I've had zero issue with any light speed. No customer has ever come back to me with creaking issues, ever. Now, it could just be that I'm the best mechanic in the world, but I don't think that's the case. I think it is simply that when you have a well-constructed bottom bracket shell, you will not get a problem. It's simply the case. If the bottom bracket shell is made properly, it is not going to be a problem for you. But that's not the case with carbon frames. So they came up with T47 to try and eliminate that issue. And what they're doing is they're putting in an aluminium sleeve into the frame with the intention of then threading that sleeve and then threading in cups, a bit like a BSA, because everybody remembers BSA, and everybody thinks that because they never had problems with BSA in a British Standard threaded cups, that means that BSA is the solution. But what they don't realize is the reason we never had problems with BSA bottom brackets is because all the bikes back then with BSA bottom brackets, like this one I'm riding right now, were all metal bikes. You don't get problems with metal bikes because metal bikes don't creak like a carbon frame does, okay? So they've totally misinterpreted the issue here. And I think that the marketing departments have done that intentionally to confuse people. You know, they're selling you snake oil again. So it's really not the solution, because the problem with putting any kind of aluminium sleeve, and they have tried this before, they used to try and put smooth aluminium sleeves in, like the bottom bracket in a Lightspeed, right? A metal cut, a metal tube. They tried gluing those into carbon frames before, and I've seen them in myself. I had a specialized tarmac come in one time, and the aluminium sleeve had corroded around the carbon fiber, and the bond had broken, and the whole thing was just rotating in the frame. They don't work as well, because you've got aluminium next to carbon, you get galvanic corrosion, and even if they manage to isolate the aluminium away from the carbon fiber somehow with the resin, you also have something called expansion and contraction, which as a result of heat. So if you live in a hot country and you go from an air-conditioned house out for a hot ride like I do, then your bike is expanding and contracting. And the same goes if you live in a cold country and your bike is hot inside the house where you've got the heating on if you can afford it, and then you go outside and you know, your bike contracts. Expansion and contraction. And you cannot escape this. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, that's going to happen to your bike. And the problem is that the differing materials, because one material is going to be carbon fiber and the other material is going to be aluminium, and they expand and contract at different rates. So basically, you're always going to have that issue. It might never happen to you, but that danger is always there with a carbon fiber bike that has a glued in aluminium shell. So my opinion of T47 is it's really a waste of time. If you've got a carbon bike with T47, it's not the solution. The solution is having a round hole. If you can machine that hole into the frame before you install your bottom bracket, or you can check that frame before you install it in, a press fit bottom bracket will work just as well as any other bottom bracket. So the whole thing of T47 is just a marketing ploy. And a lot of people have asked me online, on forums and stuff with regards to Lightspeed bikes, whether they should go for the new option of the T47 bottom bracket with the Lightspeed frame. And really it's a complete waste of time and money, because a threaded shell is going to be way more vulnerable to damage, especially if it's like an aluminium threading, because they're very, very soft. You can easily mis-thread or cross-thread an aluminium bottom bracket shell if you're not careful. So the threads are not a good thing. The threads are actually making you more likely to have a serious problem during installation. The other thing is, like with the Lightspeed one, although it's titanium threads, even titanium threads, they're very thin. You know, it's the strongest metal, but you could still damage a titanium thread, even with an aluminium cup, if you cross-thread it. With a threaded area, you've also got a greater surface area. So if it's a steel frame or an aluminium frame, you have a greater potential for corrosion. And yeah, it's just unnecessary. It's completely unnecessary. Like I say, with my Thai bikes that I built, they've all had PF30 bottom brackets, and none of them have ever had any creaking issues. So me personally, I wouldn't bother with the T47 on a Lightspeed either. It's just an unnecessary addition. You can still run any cranks you like in a PF30 system. If you want to run 24mm cranks, you just get a reducer and you reduce down the bottom bracket size and you stick in a 24mm. If you want to run 30s or dub, you can still do that. So, like I say, the threaded part is just another step. It's an unnecessary step. And what people also don't realize is that they think that all press fit things are bad because press fit things have a bad reputation. But if you think about it, the cups in this bike right here, which is a steel bike, are pressed in to a threaded, the bearings in this steel bike are pressed into a threaded cup. And the bearings in your wheels are pressed in. And you don't have issues with those. So again, it's not about whether a bearing is pressed in or not, it's about the material you press it into. A steel bearing pressed into a carbon frame is a bad idea. It's why Trek stopped making their BB90, I believe it was, system, because that was where they took carbon frames and they literally had carbon slots in the frame to press the steel bearings directly into. And that was a bloody awful idea, because you were pressing in a very hard steel bearing, hardened steel bearing, into a soft carbon fiber frame. And what happened? Well, obviously, over time of pressing them in and pressing them out during maintenance, you damaged the frame and then the bearings didn't fit anymore. Plus the fact those idiots at Trek couldn't even make the shells round to begin with, so they didn't even work properly. So there you go. So as always, folks, it's the same with me. My issue is with carbon bikes. That's why T47 is not worth your time. T47 is not worth your time because it's in a carbon bike, and if it's in a metal bike, it's also not worth your time because press fit will do just fine in a metal bike. There's simply no need for it. So back to the question I started with, which was, would you consider not buying a bike just because of the bottom bracket system? And I'm gonna have to go because this one's not going to change for me, I don't think. Oh, okay. I'm only just finishing off the video anyway. Oh, it did change. There you go. I'm just wrapping up the video here, folks. So yeah, where was I? Yeah, so the original question was, would I be put off buying a bike frame based on the bottom bracket system? And I would have to say no. I have both threaded and non-threaded bottom bracket bikes, and neither is an issue for me. I'm quite happy with both. But for me, the only thing that would put me off a bike is the material. So I would buy an aluminium bike with a threaded shell, or an aluminium bike with a press fit shell. I'd buy a tie bike with both. I'd buy a steel bike with both, but I wouldn't buy a carbon frame with either.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
That's, for me, the answer to the question. So yeah, no, it wouldn't put me off. I'm just put off by the frame material. But there you go, folks. Sorry to be a Debbie Downer on carbon frames yet again, but I'm just spitting the facts on this one, and if you don't like it, you can let me know in the comments below. All right, folks, whatever you're doing, wherever you're riding, whatever conditions or time of day, please do stay safe, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.